we do have the opportunity of the MSP panel coming up. It is really good, I think, always to hear directly from the government and their thoughts. And it's very clear to me from conversations we have with them and conversations that you think that sentiment is there. I suppose the real question that we're putting to ourselves today is like, what's the opportunity and what are the challenges, the barriers we have to overcome to make that sentiment a bit more real, and to unlock some of that potential for funding and reform that we're looking for in a policy sense. Perhaps those are questions we can put to our MSP panel. I'm going to quickly introduce them all. First up, we have, and I'm only going by order on my screen, no other defining principle. We have Pam Duncan Glancy, who's the Scottish Labour MSP for Glasgow region. I know Pam has a passion for education, and she's been a real trailblazer, in particular in support for those with additional needs. And she's a party spokesperson for education and a party spokesperson for skills as well. We've also got Megan Gallagher joining us. She's for the Scottish Conservative Unionist Party. She's an MSP for Central Scotland region, someone that's very much known to YouthLink as part of the Joint Secretariat for the cross-party group on children and young people, which she chairs, and also in her role as the Shadow Minister for Children and Young People for the Conservatives. We've also got Fulton McGregor joining us. He's the SNP MSP for Coatbridge and Kristen, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Fulton, Deputy Convener for the cross-party group on volunteering, and sits on the Equality and Human Rights Committee. I also know Fulton through his role on the group for outdoor education, and I know that youth work is something that's very important to him. Look, I'll say a couple of things. Both my parents are teachers. I regularly have to deal with groups of unruly young people. So I do have a teacher voice I can deploy, but Fiona Bruce, I'm not. So do try to keep it to 2 or 3 sentences. I'm not promising we'll get around everyone with every question, but we'll do our very best. I think we have Alex Cole-Hamilton joining us as well in just a minute. Look, but first things first, and we'll start with Pam. She's first to the screen. Ministers are busy people, but we've all got busy diaries, don't we? So just in a couple of sentences, like why have you chosen to give up your time to be with us today?
Thank you for that, and good morning to everyone. It's lovely to see you all on what I think Graham Day has already mentioned is a really important day for children and young people's rights in Scotland. Given this afternoon's debate on the reconsideration of the UNCRC, which I'm sure we're all looking forward to participating in and hopeful for. I'm proud to come along today, and the reason I'm proud to come along today is because I understand and recognise the crucial part that youth work plays in Scotland, not just by providing young people the support networks and lifelines that they need, that they can't always, or not all young people can get elsewhere, but also because it is a vibrant sector that really does require the support and resources that it needs to continue providing that incredible, valuable support to young people in Scotland. And some of the challenges that have been touched on already that I've heard, I was trying to quickly scribble down some of the things that were written on that slide earlier about the challenges, are exactly the reason why we need youth work. So we need youth work to be there to help young people come together, to have space to talk about the issues that they can't necessarily do in other environments, maybe like either in the home or in school. It's so important. And finally, I just think it's crucial to remember that youth work adds value to the things that we do across society. So it would be almost unthinkable for anyone to consider that education is something we should that we shouldn't value. But if we value education, we also have to value youth work as well. And so that's why I'm more than happy to give up my morning or to contribute to the morning that you all have today and celebrate with you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Pam. That's really concise and again, great sentiment. Megan, again, just because you're second on my screen.
Well, thank you so much for having me here this morning. It's excellent to see so many on the call to talk about an issue that's so important, and to echo what Pam Duncan Glancy has said, I'm so proud to be here as well, not just because youth work is essential to everything that we do in terms of education and supporting young people through various different points in their life. It also is it's also the crux, I think, to learner journeys, and I think that's something that, that we really need to touch on. There's a quote from the Hayward Review that will always stick with me, and it's youth work needs to come in from the margins because it's central to learner journey, and that, I think, is probably the quote of today in terms of what needs to be set out in terms of the future of youth work, but indeed as Pam Duncan-Glancy again touched on, the challenges that we face just now within youth work. I mean, I've had a really short journey in terms of my own experiences with youth work. For a couple of years I was going through my officer training in the Girls Brigade. That was a wonderful time because I was able to support so many young people going through that as well. But we all need to relook at youth work, and that's why the review of community learning and development is so important. But I think, just as a slight warning, we need to make sure that review does not remain a review, and actions are taken away from the review and actually put in place to make sure that youth work is sustainable but also grows in the future. So there's a lot to talk about today, so I'll probably stop my remarks there, Rory, but I'm really delighted to be here.
Thank you so much, Megan. And last but by no means least, Fulton.
Thanks, Rory. And the first thing I should probably say is the pronunciation is Christen. So
very good, very good. That's that you learn every day's a school day, I like to say.
Thanks, and thanks very much for inviting me along today. I find myself broadly agreeing with Pam and Megan. I'm not sure if it will stay like that through the whole panel, but certainly broadly agree with their sentiments. I mean, I think youth work, I would describe it as the cornerstone of working with young people. It's so important. My own background before becoming an MSP, I was a social worker. 8 years of that was in children and families, and I seen the value firsthand of when youth workers were involved with young people, particularly young people who are maybe at that age, and because of a whole range of circumstances in their lives, are beginning to maybe consider paths that wouldn't be good for them, and the importance and the impact of youth work in helping children and young people to make other choices and other decisions is so crucial. And I think if we lose that and we don't continue or fund it properly, then we're going to end up with more and more difficulties. And the Cabinet Secretary for Education, Jenny Gilruth, had a statement a couple of weeks ago in Parliament about behaviour in schools. And I think, personally, one of the keys that I hope will come out of that will be youth work, because I think that our teachers have got a massive role to play within schools, but we need to support children when they're outside of school as well. And I can't speak highly enough of this sector, and that's why, to answer your question, which is a very broad opening one, that's why I'm happy to come along this morning and talk to everybody. And I know we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the questions, but certainly that's me. And a bit like Megan as well, I've got a wee bit of experience as well. I was in the Boys Brigade as a youngster myself, and went on to do the officer training for a short period before our company actually collapsed. But that was a long time ago, and I'll not show my age by giving you the exact dates, but early 2000s maybe. Thanks.
Always best to be subtle about these things, Fulton. Well, look, then a couple of us have touched on kind of the Hayward Review, and also Jenny Gilruth's comments in the last week or two, and I think it would be churlish for us to ignore that kind of the future of youth work at the moment is kind of really wrapped up in all that bundle of conversations happening around skills reform, etc. And maybe actually, Fulton, perhaps first off, just go and kind of sort of straight back to you in this one. And what opportunities does that lifelong learning and skills reform agenda present to strengthen the position of youth work? Where should we be focusing our efforts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that youth work, I would like to see youth work taking a more central role in their agenda, for change and within education. I don't know what's happened, but I'm picking up from speaking to the organisations, many of whom are around the table today, and just, even within my own constituency, that has maybe seen a bit of decline over recent times. No, I don't think AMD's really too sure the reason for that. I think with the wee blog posts that you were doing earlier and you were reading out, and some folk were mentioning words like apathy and lack of funding and all sort of stuff that maybe links to maybe, the youth work being seen as one of the first things to go when funding gets tight, and we can, all talk about the reasons why funding's tight, but it is across Scotland, across the UK just now. We are in a period of austerity, and what I would like this discussion that we're having just now is about showing the importance of youth work and why youth work should be seen as a critical part of any plans to move forward education or move forward attainment or move forward any of the goals that the government have laid out. And I think that a discussion like this can be the start of that, because I think what we need to be spelling out as the consequences if youth work is not is not in that position, and we're going to run into more difficulties. And in fact, possibly, I'm imagining I'll get quite a lot of agreement from the folk that are on this call, but we're possibly beginning to see those results in terms of the behaviour in school report, which did indicate that there has been an increase in negative behaviours and relationships. And is that because actually youth work has had to take a less of a prominent role in recent years? So that's just putting that out there, but I would like, I'll certainly be an advocate for that. I know my MSP colleagues, Megan and Pam, will be as well, but I think that we all must be, and we must try and make sure that youth work is right back front and centre of any plans. Sorry, I've been a long-winded.
No, you're all good. Well, passion's a good thing, I like to say, and touching on that importance of demonstrating impact and how that brings the kind of the policy conversation to life. Pam, I don't know if you want to add your perspectives on this one, particularly skills reform and what's going on at the moment.
Thank you. So yes, I would echo some of what Fulton said in terms of keeping it at the forefront, and MSP colleagues making sure that when we discuss these things in the chamber or when we're talking about education, and I kind of touched on that in opening remarks, that we have to understand that no one size fits all is the answer to this, and that youth work is part of the patchwork and jigsaw, I guess, of all the things that we need to put together to make sure that we have a world-class education system in Scotland. But it's beyond education. As well. So there are lots of opportunities, I think, going forward in this parliamentary term and indeed in some of the legislation that's coming for us to do that. On reform and on skills, I don't think I'm going to be making the front pages when I tell everyone again today that I'm a bit disappointed in some of the announcements I've heard lately, because I'm not sure they've had the detail that we're looking for. I think we probably need to see more of a focus on what do we need to do to help young people have the confidence and skills to be able to really face the challenges that we've got today, some of which are included in things like the behaviour in schools. The fact that in the national conversation, children and young people rated being safe at school as one of the most important things for them. There's a time when that was a given. And so we really do have to understand the contribution that youth work makes to that. And value that. We also, as politicians, and I take this as a criticism of myself and my party as much as I do of anyone else, that we have to think in the longer term. So some things are going to need a bit of investment up front, but we know that they will pay dividends in the future, and I think we have to remember that more so in times when it's quite difficult. The review of community education as part of the skills response that Minister Day outlined this week, weeks pass, days pass, is crucial. But we need to know what that's going to look like. And the other thing that we don't know yet, but there is an opportunity here, but I'd like to start to see some meat on the bones of it, is if we're going to make some of the changes that Hayward suggested, including around the personal pathway, then there's another opportunity there for youth work and youth workers to support young people to gain skills in a different way than they might have before, and recognise the parity of esteem across academic attainment and achievement in different ways. Then we need to start understanding what that means for the government and what the role of education, youth work and beyond is in delivering those outcomes and opportunities for young people that are just beyond the kind of traditional model of knowledge and exams.
Thank you so much, Pam. I'm just conscious questions that are coming in the chat now, and I'm going to start knocking them together, Megan. I hope that's okay. Let them really touch on there the need for investment and the fact that investment can basically, a long-term, will pay long-term dividends. Investing now is what we need to do for the future, but also maybe that little lack of detail. And I know you mentioned the Hayward Review earlier. What's your position in this? Like, how do we invest? Is this a policy question? Is this a funding question? And obviously, we've got a UK government different to the Scottish government at the moment who's in charge, and we've got kind of funding questions at both levels there, and we're worried about councils as well. Should this be on councils to fund? How do we square that kind of policy and funding question?
It's a huge question, and I'm not sure we've got enough time to get into all of the different pockets of those important points that you've raised there, Rory. But I mean, I think there's two figures that stand out to me. It's one is the value that youth work brings to the economy, and that's 656 million. The second quote is 450,000 young people are impacted by some form of youth work. So if we don't do something now, and I mean now, with youth work, then we're not going to get the money that it generates for the economy, but also the support that's needed for young people. And that's where, I think, we all need to look at the priorities just now in terms of, what the government's ambitions are. We also need to look at funding, and that's where I think there'll be a little bit of division amongst MSPs, because as we've noticed and as we've seen over the last decade, we've had a substantial cut to council budgets. Now, that's had a direct impact on youth work, undoubtedly had a direct impact on youth work. And I saw it myself when I was a local councillor in North Lanarkshire. There were decisions that councillors did not want to make, but they were only decisions that they could take in order to put through a balanced budget when it came round to budget season. So usually when the budgets are tight or the cuts being delivered to local councils, it is things, unfortunately, like youth work that will go, because they are not seen as statutory instruments within councils in terms of things that councils must carry out as a duty, such like your bin collections and all the rest of it. So perhaps there might need to be something in there to protect youth work, to make sure that it's not subjected to cuts. However, that would further restrict councils in terms of the decisions that they could take, because if they don't take from youth work, then they would take from another pocket of education, which would probably still have direct consequences on the work being carried out by youth workers across Scotland. But I think it also comes down to priorities of governments. Now, we all know we get the UK government delivers a block grant to the Scottish government. So again, it's probably looking at how that block grant is therefore divided up against all the many different policy priorities of the Scottish government. So I think there's a lot in this, but there needs to be a serious discussion around the whole funding and future protection of youth work. But again, as said, when we're carrying out reviews like we are just now with community learning and development, my worry is that we'll carry out these reviews, then recommendations will be made, and then those recommendations will not be carried out, perhaps because there's not enough, the Scottish Government says there's not enough money to carry those out, or perhaps because it's not higher up the policy priority for the Scottish Government. So I think there's a lot in this. But that's upon us as MSPs. We need to listen, not just to youth workers who are on this conference today, but also young people, because as I said, 450,000 young people benefit from youth work. So we need to listen to the benefits that young people get on the back of the youth work that they're involved in as well. So as said, there's a big questions to be asked here, but I'm not sure we'll get into all the pockets of it today.
Yeah, it is a deep and multi-layered question, isn't it? I was really interested in your comments on a statutory instrument, like given that we're talking today about our right to youth work. Like Fulton, obviously, I can't ask you to speak for the whole government, but on a personal view, is that a route worth exploring?
Yeah, possibly. I think I think, as Megan says, it comes with other challenges, right enough, because you would then have a situation where councils really don't like the Scottish Government telling them what to spend their money on. And that is, so there's always a bit of to and fro between that. But I think the issue that Megan was talking about there, if I move on from it, is twofold. I think that we all accept that that we're in a time of austerity and that money is really tight. And this wouldn't be the place for myself and Megan or Pam or MD to have any constitutional battle over that. But councils across the UK and the governments in both the UK and Scotland and elsewhere within the UK are really struggling just now. So that is a fact that we can't get away from. It's not great that a resource-rich country like Scotland is in this position, but it is, and that's the fact of the matter. I think the other bit though we need to look at, which is probably more important for today, is where does youth work sit in that, and why should youth work be one of the first to take the hit? Because I think we're all sort of accepting that has happened or is happening as well, and that's where I think that all of us here can do something more practically about. That's the MSPs that are online, the leaders of the various organisations who are online in terms of your roles, and youth workers, everybody who's here. And I think what we need to do is, there is a budget process starting, which will be finalised in the start of the new year. And I think that you need to make your voices heard to government through that. You can do that through ourselves as politicians, but you can also do that yourself directly. And I know many of you, Rory and Scouts, for example, Youth Link Scotland, various others are very capable and able of doing that. And I think you need to sort of pull together some sort of narrative, almost describe it as a campaign, if you like, which I know that you're doing anyway, and events like this are part of, to say, look, we need to be considered, a priority in the upcoming budget, because, and this is the reasons why, because we can help with the behaviour and relationships in schools that have been identified. We can help with the attainment gap that has been identified. We can help social work services which are struggling, health services which are struggling. And when it's outlined like that and it gets into ministers, cabinet secretaries and civil servants, that's where decisions can be made. And I think what we need to do is all pull together to try and make sure that youth work is as high as a priority as it possibly can be.
Yes, thank you, Thornton. A question of prioritization, with lots of competing forces. And it's interesting that you speak about kind of the role of the voluntary sector in that, of which we're, like many of us are a part, certainly. And it'd be really, really interesting to think about how that sits alongside formal educators. Say, for example, Scouts as a movement, about 33,000 young people in Scotland involved in scouting, and how perhaps we can bring that to the fore to try and balance those books a bit better. Pam, I'm not sure what your perspective on that is. Like, should youth work be a higher priority within budgets at the moment, or do we need to look for another solution? It's somewhat a softball question to say, well, yes is the answer to that. I suppose the key question is really, where should the balance for that be? Should it sit with central government, do you think, or is that very much an issue for local authorities?
Actually, I think, and I'm furiously taking notes here as we're all chatting. I actually think it's both, to be honest, and that might be a softball answer. Because ultimately, local authorities raise about 30% of their revenue. 70% comes from the Scottish Government, 70 or 80% comes from the Scottish Government. So actually, if we have a government that values youth work, and they believe in subsidiarity, which means that decisions should be taken as close to people as possible, which actually I think is what a lot of the youth work movement is about, and supporting young people in particular to be part of that, then we need to make sure that enough money goes to local government and enough resources and direction, and then that is distributed appropriately within each locality. But even there's almost a step before that, which is we need a bit of direction in what does the government see the role of youth work as being? Where does it add value? Where is it distinct and only it can do it? and where does it add value to what we're already doing? And once you begin to answer those questions, I think then you can begin to say, okay, is it something that needs to be higher up the funding priority? Is it something that needs to be part of delivery of a broader service and it can input to it? Are there different ways in which we can find the resources or use the resources differently? But you need that direction about an answer to the question, what does the government want youth work to do? Where is it going to do it uniquely and only on its own? And where is it, well, not on its own, because youth work can't work in isolation, but you know what I mean, as in the lead for it. And where is it going to add value to what's already been done? Then you start to ask questions about, right, what does that mean for the Scottish Government's budget? What does it mean for local government budget? What does it mean for local government decision making as well? So it's, yeah, I say it's a softball answer, but it's complicated, I guess.
Yeah, no, you ask a softball question, you get a softball answer. But look, it's really interesting that you burrowing down into that concept of value, and it touches a bit earlier on what you said about investment as well. And it's certainly something that as a sector, I certainly think we believe that youth work has the potential for huge value beyond what it's producing as a moment, purely because, well, say from a scouting point of view, what we do as an organization is we teach skills for life. And, it's that resilience, those communication, those teamwork skills that people need. And that's the same skills that our employers say they need as well. So there's that real opportunity for long-term value. Look, I'm going to change tack slightly, Megan. I hope you don't mind to stop us going round in this funding question, because I know it's a big deal. But I've got a question that's coming about suicide. We've talked a bit about violence in schools. These things are not separate. These things are related, in my view, at least. Suicide is the single leading cause of death in young people under 35. And it's a national scandal, essentially. And what more can be done through, for example, by prioritizing youth work to address that?
Yeah, and that's a horrific statistic, and it's one that should concern us all, and it's one that we should be working collectively on, regardless of political persuasion, to try and solve. But you're absolutely spot on. Youth work plays the most vital role in that, because not only does youth work bring the life skills for young people, but it also gives young people a sense of belonging. You belong to a club, you belong to essentially, a network, another family, whoever you're involved with, you seem to, grow within that space, and it's a safe space as well. And many young people feel that they're able to perhaps, talk about things that they might not be able to talk about otherwise with perhaps their school friends or their family or home situations. So there's a lot that youth work can do to support this. But again, it comes down to other issues as well, because if you're involved in youth work, you're less likely to perhaps be sitting at home online, where you can be subjected to online bullying and harassment. Similarly, if you're being bullied at school, there'll be someone within that youth work organisation that you might be able to speak to confidentially, but feel as though that you've got that support network round about you to try and help deal with some of the issues that you might be experiencing at that point in time. So I absolutely am a strong advocate for youth work and youth organisations, helping young people through what can be really very challenging moments in their lives. But again, there's a huge other discussion that needs to be had. I mean, violence in schools was spoken about earlier on as well, and that there's a whole big discussion here in terms of how do we better support our young people with the challenges that they face now, which is probably completely different to the challenges that we faced when we were growing up. And we need to make sure that youth work is very much involved in that, but also around the table when we're having the discussions, because you're probably picking up some discussions that perhaps schools are not picking up and other places are not picking up as well. So it's so important. But I think also, and we've spoken a bit about UNCRC this morning as well, it's the incorporation of the rights of the child and making sure that young people understand their rights and understand that they can speak out, they can speak to people, confidentially about issues that they're facing as well. So again, there's a whole big package in this, but obviously more needs to be done, because that statistic is absolutely horrific.
Yeah, no, Megan, and no, I appreciate that, and I appreciate that sentiment. And what seems to come through in your comments is that need for a holistic approach. And we talked about COSLA earlier, and I wonder if that a closer relationship with government. I'm not sure what that relationship's like at the moment, but could be something that could help sort this funding question. I also wonder how we begin, like as a movement, we begin to engage around sort of like strike the right balance between that, say, that funded and that voluntary sector to start getting that holistic picture of what's going on in young people's lives. Fulton, these must be issues that you dealt with a lot previously in your past life, as I put it. What's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I mean, it probably goes back to my previous answer that I think that that there does need to be a concerted effort. I was having a wee look at the some of the questions in the chat there, and I think it's Judith perhaps has said, why should we fight for it when it's well known? It is well known. It's well known to folk who are involved in the sector, who have got a background in the sector, perhaps in social work or whatever else. It's well known to me. But I think every sector needs to recalibrate at certain points and remind governments of whatever political persuasion or at whatever level the importance. That could be at council level, Scottish Government level, or UK Government level. And these things are particularly more important when in terms of financial crisis, because everybody is wanting a wee bit more of that pot. So, I think your question is right there, Rory, that how do we pull together? And I think there is skills and expertise within this group that can do that. And I think even having this today is good. Obviously, the minister came along earlier. He had a wee bit of input. Then you've had a panel of MSPs, and then I see you've got a very full agenda for the rest of the day. So even being able to take that back, I know that myself, Megan, and Pam will probably leave quite enthused about how we're going to support you as well. So what you might find is you've got two opposition MSPs here, and Pam and Megan, and they can approach it from that way. A backbench government MSP and myself can approach it from other angles. So you're actually covering quite a lot of bases, even just by having this event, and hopefully you'll begin to see over the next couple of weeks up to Christmas and then into the early new year us pushing that, and I'll certainly commit to do that. I wouldn't speak for my other colleagues, but I know they're both very strong voices in the chamber, and I'm sure they will do so as well. But you can be certainly guaranteed that you'll see some questions from me coming in to the government on the importance of youth work. But yeah, it is frustrating. I get it as an ex-children and family social worker. In fact, I've kept my registration, so I can still say that I'm a social worker. It should all be known. It should. I completely agree with Judith's comments. It should be known, but it's not unusual for that, perhaps, for other priorities to be fighting and competing. And I think that we need to make sure that youth work is still high up there. I know we're short on time, Rory, but I did want to make comment on your last question to Megan as well, which was about the suicide rates for young people, because it's such a shocking statistic. And I just want to say as well that, well, a lot of these things, as everybody in this call will know, and I certainly felt in my time in social work, a lot of these things are just about relationships. Folk, young people, they're young people that you all work with out there, they often don't have a positive relationship with parents or carers or anybody else, and schools became such a disruptive place for them that they can't get a good relationship with a teacher often as well. But when they do get that relationship with a teacher or somebody else, it makes a huge amount of difference just to have that really strong, positive connection with somebody. I've seen it all the time in my own practice when I was a social worker, and youth workers often provide that because you're skilled. I've seen that a lot. Whenever I had a youth worker involved with one of my families, it was like, that's brilliant. It was great. It was great to have that because, that young person had that positive relationship. That's the person they would open up to. That's the person they would talk to. And it makes such a difference. And this is the sort of stuff that we need. We shouldn't be, I agree, but this is the sort of stuff that we need to be making sure that the government, councils, etc., are listening to when they're making decisions that, can have such a big impact. Thanks, and sorry for the long answer again, Rory.
No, thank you, Fulton, for that. Lots of astute sort of comments coming through about funding and other things, noticing particularly, youth work isn't backed like sports with like a statutory fund, like the lottery sort of topped up for government. The arts is the same, heritage is the same, but there's nothing there for youth work. It's a really interesting thought from Tila there. A few talking about the necessity of having that conversation in the round that you referred to, Fulton. I know we'd really respect that. And talking about including everyone, there's a really interesting question that came through. Pam, I know you are a big voice in the inclusion space, and this question is particularly about misogyny and preventing gender-based violence, and what's the role of youth work there? I would like to extend that out really, and what is the role of youth work, and how can government and MSP support the role of youth work in really ensuring that everyone's rights are respected and everyone's included, particularly in this age of kind of political polarities, I would say.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And actually, this is an issue that we discussed at committee last week now, and when we looked at equally safe in schools, and we heard from young people in particular about what they need. And one of the things that came across really strongly was that they need, well, first of all, boys and girls, young men and young women, need opportunities to discuss what a healthy relationship looks like from a very early stage, all the way through their lives. And it's not just about a very specific one-off piece of input. It has to be a lot more holistic and come across in every different aspect of what we do in schools. And the reason for that, of course, as we all know, is because it is structural inequality that, of course, drives some of this. I think youth work has got a really important part to play there, not just because it came out as really important, that sometimes teachers and guidance teachers and staff in schools are really key to this, but sometimes it has to be someone else as well. And in particular, the voice of having young people and youth work in that space, I think, is going to be crucial. There's a role, I think, there for helping young people and helping schools and families and communities. In fact, it takes me back to a point that was made. We talk about a whole school approach to bullying and to gender-based violence and issues like that. Actually, we need a whole community approach, I think, and that's why it's important to bring youth work into that too. And we know that schools have got a responsibility for addressing things like health and wellbeing, equality, safeguarding, all of that, but they're not actually required to undertake a specific programme of that. And we know that, again, youth work has got a particular key focus in that area. So I think there's a huge part that youth work could play in this, and we need to think about that, but we'll only do it if we think about it as more than a whole school approach. It's actually a whole community approach.
Thank you so much, Pam. And I think that's really, really astute. Again, coming out the need to have that conversation in the round. Look, by the time we touch on these inequalities issues, it's inevitable, the rights of the child, that's coming back to the Scottish Parliament soon. Like, Megan, do you see youth work as a mechanism for participation in that? It's not something we've always done brilliantly on before. And without this reprioritisation of youth work, can we hope to meet the challenge that the UN rights to the child put on us, or are we going to fall back?
Yes, and I think we're all looking forward to the debate this afternoon on UNCRC. I think this has been a long time coming. So I'm hoping that by this afternoon we will all have a positive outcome that will actually incorporate UNCRC into Scots law. So we'll wait and see the debate this afternoon, but I'll certainly be participating, and I hope other colleagues, perhaps Pam and Fulton, will be participating too. But the point you make is absolutely spot on, because youth work will be essential to the practical elements of UNCRC, in terms of making sure young people are aware of their rights, certainly supporting people with their rights, because of course UNCRC brings in that legal element as well, to make sure that if something does happen to a young person and they do for whatever reason need to use and utilise the legal system, that certainly available for them, and they're able to access that with ease. So youth work will play such an essential role in that, not just about the learning of UNCRC, but also in terms of the support whenever a young person needs it. So I think that's why it'll be so important once hopefully UNCRC is over the line, and we actually get it incorporated into Scots law. We'll then see the practical examples filtered out. But that's probably been a slight worry for me in terms of UNCRC, is actually making sure that young people are aware of their rights. Now, I know that there's been excellent examples across the board within youth work, third private voluntary organisations, local councils, getting young people ready for UNCRC. But I think we just need to make sure that, once this actually comes into law, that young people are aware of their rights, they know their rights, and they know how to exercise their rights as well, because this is what UNCRC is all about. And we've talked about UNCRC from 2018, but actually its whole journey started in 1991. I wasn't even born in 1991, so we've been talking about UNCRC for a very, very long time. So hopefully, once we get it over the line, youth work will play that integral role, and perhaps again promote how important youth work is in terms of young people being involved, and making sure legislation works for them in the Scottish Parliament, in the UK Parliament, other places, but also in terms of the support that they need whenever they need it.
Thank you for that, Megan. And I think, really astute comments about how it's the need to progress from what's essentially a conceptual framework to action on the ground, and, education reform, and how that's all wrapped up in that. I'd be remiss not to mention the comment here from Girl Guiding Scotland. 40% of girls in Scotland, only 41% of girls in Scotland learned about healthy relationships in school. Only 29% learned it about sexual harassment, and I know that that's a big issue there, and definitely a gap for youth work to fill. Should also mention the role of scouting too, and how we very much try and bring the rights of the child into our own programme, and are building that through our age groups. So there's multiple touch points. How do we get them working together to move from concept to action? What's your perspective on this, Fulton? Are you planning to speak this afternoon? Are you? I presume you'd be supportive, but again, I suppose it's how do we move, as I'm saying, from that concept to action in your view?
Yeah, thanks. And again, I agree with most of what Megan said in response to this question. I will be speaking this afternoon, and maybe with myself and Megan both speaking, you'll begin to see the fruits of even this work this morning with youth work getting a mention. I know you'll still be folk here will still be engaged in the afternoon session when that's on, but you can watch it and catch up, and hopefully we say some things and put some questions to the minister that you'll be happy with. Obviously, UNCRC, we're all eager for it to go over the line this afternoon. It was already, as everybody here knows, it was already passed unanimously by the Scottish Parliament in the last session, but unfortunately we've had to come back for the first time a reconsideration. So it is a much weaker bill than the Scottish Government had hoped in terms of enshrining children's rights in law. But that is what it is. It's a bit like what I've said earlier, and I think we need to make it work. We need to make sure that children are aware of their rights. They are aware of how to action those rights. And I think that in the context of youth work, if youth work services were to continue to experience a drop in funding, a lack of resources, then children should be able to say, that's their rights been taken away. And I think that many would do that, because the value of those relationships is really important to them. So yeah, it's going to be a wee bit of a teething period about how we implement the UNCRC, how all the organisations that work with our children and young people, including many here, but a feeling that many here will know how to do that and are already working on a rights-based approach. But across the sector, and making sure that the children's rights are forefront in all the decisions that we make. And certainly my job, even as a backbencher for the government, as well as Megan and Pam's job, our job directly in Parliament is to hold the government to account on that when they're making their decisions. Your local councillors across the country, their job is to hold their local authorities to account when they're making decisions on that, and the MPs likewise at Westminster. So that, you know, we've all got to do a bit in our own different areas to make sure that children's rights are heard and valued, and that youth work for the purposes of today is front and centre of that. Thanks.
Thank you, Fulton. And, you know, certainly as a Scout movement, we are encouraging our young people to do just that. It's to hold people to account for their rights being upheld. Look, it would be both churlish not to take a question from your own chief executive, as well as it's a great note to finish on. But we have a question come in here. Well, I suppose you've encountered maybe a virtual room full of people today, good people as someone highlighted down in a message just a minute ago, youth workers, volunteers who were there for young people during the pandemic and have really helped them through that. And they're maybe facing a time of real discouragement right now, and they perceive it as real challenges and wheels moving slowly. So, you know, as MSPs, you know, backbencher government or whatever, what's the positive message that you can send to the thousands of volunteers and youth workers around the country who are working hard to empower our young people every day, that their impact is really valuable to the future young people, and despite the financial challenges, there is a real future for this sector? Pam, perhaps you'd like to come in first for that.
Thank you. It is difficult, like it's really difficult, I get that, but what I would say to people just now is something my gran said to me actually, which was hard work's not easy and easy work's hard to find. And I think that in the youth work or in the right space, we often find hard work very easily. But we've won battles in the past. Today, I suspect the Parliament is going to vote again to bring the UNCRC into domestic legislation, and that's not happened by accident. That's happened because of the hard work that all of you, all of us on this call and at this conference have done. So take comfort in the fact that change happens. It might feel glacial, and I am always frustrated by the pace of change, but it does happen and we can do it. And there are a number of opportunities. The UNCRC coming into legislation is the start, not the end, of human rights for young children and young people. There is a huge amount of reform in education needed, and the government have indicated that they want to do that. That's another opportunity. And we know that there are all parties are supportive of reducing the attainment gap and addressing issues like child poverty and homelessness for children and young people. All of these things, there's a lot of political agreement. Take those, I would suggest, and remember that there is a lot of goodwill to do that. But goodwill won't be enough, as you all know. It's going to take hard graft, and none of us in this call are shy of that. So that's what I would say. It can be done. It might be glacial, but we'll get there.
Thank you so much for that, Pam. Megan.
Thank you. I think I've got a simple message, because I do agree with everything that Pam's just said there, because you're not forgotten. You are valued, and without you, young people throughout all points in their life would fall through the gaps in our education and learning channels. So that's how important youth work is to young people, but to us as well, who are behind the scenes making all the policies. I think what we need to get better at, and it's something that Fulton touched upon earlier on, is relationship building. And I certainly want to hear from any one of you who have got any issues that you want us to raise directly in the Parliament, because I think that's really important. We are here to represent all of you, and we're here to ask the difficult questions. It might not always result in the positive answers, but we have got roles here where we scrutinise and challenge the government to make better decisions that will benefit youth work, but also our young people and children, of which you all support. So if I could just say thank you for everything that you're doing, but please do contact us if there is anything that you want to raise with us. We've got a long list of things that everyone's been commenting on in the chat today. I've certainly been taking down notes in terms of what your feelings are just now, and that's something that we'll certainly be reflecting upon, because there are a lot of reviews and policies coming down the line, but we need to make sure that youth work plays an important role in that, in terms of how we shape that policy.
Thank you so much, Megan. And again, last but not least, Fulton, if you can close us out.
Thanks very much, Rory. What an absolutely fantastic session this has been, and I would just like to echo Megan's offer there. I don't know, even Rory, if you or Kevin want to put our email addresses on the chat at the end, or collate some of the questions and email them to us. I'm very happy to do that. But I suppose my message to everybody would just be, just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing fantastic work. You are often, whether it's as an individual work with a young person or as part of a group that perhaps they attend, you're often that young person's only safe place, only safe person, and that means more, I think, than we can all imagine. And I know myself, even from having worked in the sector before, when you're doing the job day in, day out, you don't really think about it like that. It's almost often when you take a step back, but you are doing a fantastic job supporting and helping our young people move through what is a very, very difficult period in time. We've had a pandemic, we've got the rise in social media that Megan talked to. These are so challenging times for our young people. I've got 3 kids myself, and I just think the world that they're grown up in is just totally different from the one that I did, and it's a different set of challenges, and you are often the only people there for them. So please keep doing what you're doing, and we will renew our fights in our respective parties and our respective positions to make sure that your voice is heard and not forgotten. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Fulton. And I just want to say thanks again for all of your time today, for joining us. I'm not sure if Alex had technical problems, but next time he knocks on my door, because he's my constituency MSP, I'll be sure to nobble him. And I know he did intend to be here. Yeah, it's great to hear that there are legislators at the Scottish Parliament who are willing to go in there and stick up for the great work that Youth Work is doing. So I really would like to thank you for your time.